Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 9th of January of 2026. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. The Russian Federation, for the second time since the beginning of the special military operation, have used the Oreshnik missile system. So what is the Oreshnik missile system? Probably this is one of the most powerful weapons in the world, and I would like to remind you, and this is a very important thing, that the first time when the Russians used the Oreshnik system took place on the 21st of November of 2025, so almost 1 year and 2 months ago. So this is the video that was published on the 21st of November of 2025, and this is the Oreshnik system of 2024. So I'm showing you this video because if we compare the Oreshnik of 2024 and the Oreshnik of 2026, obviously we will find some differences. Once again, this is the Oreshnik of 2024. I believe you're familiar with this video. And now let's move to the video that was published during the previous night by Ukrainian sources. And here we can see the Oreshnik of 2026. And as you can see, there are huge differences. First of all, it seems that the Oreshnik of 2026 is much more powerful than the Oreshnik of 2024. At least the Oreshnik of 2026 is faster. Furthermore, if you take a look at this video, obviously you will see lightnings. So it seems that there are lightnings around the Oreshnik missile or around warheads while they were traveling towards the surface. So, and we haven't seen anything like this, and we didn't saw anything like this during the Oreshnik strikes in 2025, which means that the Russians most likely during the previous year and 2 months managed to improve the Oreshnik system significantly. So the military experts are saying that this Oreshnik system was empty as the previous one, so no warhead, just a kinetic strike. But this system is a very fast one. The sources are saying that the Western intelligence, the Western systems haven't discovered the Oreshnik system in the sky when he was flying towards the most western part of Ukraine. Furthermore, during the previous 24 hours, we received lots of reports and updates of what exactly the Russians were attacking. I believe you remember this video where we can see how a person was trying to maybe to make some tea, but there were problems with gas and so on. And most of the experts, when the video was published, came to the conclusion, and this morning came to the conclusion, that most likely Russians attacked the gas storage in the western part of Ukraine, but later pro-Ukrainian sources stated that the Russians didn't attack anything. So that was just something when the Russians were trying just to show the Western countries, the European countries, their capabilities with this Oreshnik system. It was something like a message, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, that the Russians were trying to send a message to Europeans what they will face if they send troops on the territory of Ukraine. So this is the situation. Anyway, it's very difficult to understand what exactly was happening there, what kind of Oreshnik system the Russians were using. But one thing is clear, once again, this Oreshnik system most likely is much more powerful in comparison with the previous version. Once again, this one seems to be much faster. Once again, this is the Oreshnik of 2026, lightnings around missiles and warheads, and this is the Oreshnik of 2024. This is the first version of this missile. As you can see, the missiles, the warheads are much slower, and this is a very important situation. The Ukrainian source reported that the Oreshnik system of 2026 managed to pass 13,000 kilometers per hour speed, which is obviously a record right now in the world. Once again, let's summarize everything that happened during the previous 24 hours. So the Russians, according to information we have, carried out a massive missile and drone attack through the territory of Ukraine using hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles. But once again, that wasn't the biggest attack carried out by the Russians. According to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians during the previous night between the 8th and the 9th of January used just 278 air vehicles. So it's not the biggest number. The Russians during December or November September or even October used more than 5 or 6 or even 700 vehicles. So which means the biggest numbers that the Russians of drones that the Russians used during massive attacks sometimes were more than 700. So 278 is nothing. But the Russians used Oreshnik. But despite the fact that that wasn't the biggest attack since the beginning of the special military operation, the Russians, as a result of this attack, managed to deal significant damage to the city of Kiev. For example, here we can see a strike, and after this strike, right exactly in front of your screen, you can see some problems with power supply, power outages right now in front of your screens. So this is the Kiev. Furthermore, we had a lot of reports from the Ukrainian Kiev authorities. The mayor of Kiev, Klitschko, urged residents of the capital to leave the city if it's possible. I appeal to residents of the capital who have the opportunity to temporarily leave the city where there are alternative sources of electricity and heat to do so. So they're asking to leave. Furthermore, we had reports that due to problems with heating, the local authorities ask Ukrainians to do something with water, because if they don't do this, there might be huge problems with the entire heating system. I would like to remind you that according to information we have, the most difficult part of the winter is just ahead of us. According to information we have, by the 15th of January, we will see frosts of -30 by Celsius, and this temperature will cover Kiev in mid-January. And if it happens, and if Russia makes the major strike, as we discussed, they still haven't done this, then we can say that the city of Kiev will not be a city where people or a population will be able to survive or even to live. They would be forced to leave the city, at least for the winter period of time, towards, let's say, the western regions or the southern regions. Furthermore, during the previous nights, according to this map, for example, and according to different sources, the Russians were also attacking the city of Kryvyi Rog. And during the day, we received lots of videos from the city as well. So this is the strike. And as you can see, a blackout and power outages appeared immediately. So this is the beginning. The city, lots of light, buildings, constructions, the light, no problems. Then a strike, and then we can see a complete blackout in this area. So the Russians, as you can see, have changed their tactics. It seems that the Russians are tasked to finish the conflict as soon as possible, but using their own means and their own understanding of the conflict. So anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next. But as we discussed several videos ago, the 2026 is going to be the most difficult year for both the Russians and the Ukrainians, and this is going to be completely incomparable year with any other year of the special military operation. Another important thing that Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours also attacked the territory of Russia. There were attacks on the territory of the city of Oryol. Here we can see the Oryol power station that was attacked by Ukrainian drone. So here we can see the moment of explosion. And Ukrainians also attacked the city of Belgrade. Here we can see the moment when Ukrainians attacked some object of energy infrastructure, and then a power outage occurred immediately. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction where the Russia's offensive operation intensifies. First let's talk about the video that was published from the city of Zaporizhzhia itself. Here we can see how Russian drones were attacking military objects through the city of Zaporizhzhia. Here we can see how Russians attacked a train that was completely fully loaded with ammo, according to the author of this video, and the train was destroyed in the central part of the city. Furthermore, according to neutral mappers, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians improved their position significantly in the area of the settlement by the name of Primorskaya. This information was provided by a neutral mapper. So these are the changes on the ground, and most likely, if this information is correct, in coming days, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm Russian control over the southern and the central parts of the settlement. As for the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction, the most important update is coming from the Gulyai Pole agglomeration. Pro-Russian sources stated that as a result of clashes, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Zelene. So this is the video, and this is how exactly the clashes for the settlement were taking place. The Russians were bombing the settlement with aviation, with bombs, with rockets, and in the final part of the video we can see at least a flag, one flag that was raised by a Russian soldier in the central part of the settlement. Based on this video, based on the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, we have adjusted the map. So this is the situation by the end of the 8th of January, and this is the end of the 9th of January. The Russians, as you can see, managed to improve their positions significantly, and the Russians continue offensive operation on the Ukrainian side of the river of Gaichur. Now the Russians are storming the settlements of Zalizhnitne, Starokrainka, Krynichne, and Svetopetrivka. If Russians take this territory under control, then this is going to be a very powerful foothold on the Ukrainian side of the river of Gaichur through this dense network of the fortifications. As for the territory between the Dnipropetrovsk direction and the Pokrovsk direction or the Dobropolye direction, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything special. The only important thing is that the Russians are bombing and attacking Ukrainian forces through these fields with heavy flamethrower systems, with drones, with aviation. Lots of videos were published during the previous 24 hours, which means that the Russians are trying to break through Ukrainian defense and to get as close as possible to the city of Dobropolye. But despite the number of weapons and arms that the Russians are using for these purposes, the Ukrainians are still holding their lines. As for the Slaviansk direction, during the previous 24 hours we received lots of updates. Russia's FPV drones are flying in this area, trying to create as big as the kill zone as big as possible. Lots of FPV drone attacks, as you can see. Most of them took place around the Slaviansk power station. Here we can see how a Russian drone answered some hangar with Ukrainian vehicles, and then the Russians were attacking these vehicles with FPV drones. So this is a very interesting video. Another video took place in the area of the villages of Donetsk and Raigorodok. These are the main roads the main settlements that Ukraine used for the logistic purposes. Here we can see vehicles that were trying most likely to cross the river of Seversky Donets with the purpose to reinforce Ukraine's forces on the territory of the settlement of Liman, but Russians were attacking everything when the Ukrainian vehicles were trying to approach the river itself. And we see that these tactics that the Russians are using in this area began bringing first results and first dividends. The Russians managed to exhaust the settlement of Liman and the contingent of the armed forces of Ukraine on the territory of the settlement as much as possible, and when the Russians realized that it's time to begin offensive, they began offensive operation from many directions. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates according to different pro-Russian sources and neutral mappers. The Russians improved their positions along TO514, and it seems that the Russians either have already cut the TO514 road or about to do this, and the Russians, according to different pro-Russian and pro-Ukrainian and neutral sources, answered the northern part of the city of Liman as well. Which means that the Russians are trying to attack the city from two directions, trying to cut the city into smaller pieces, and then with the purpose to handle with every single part of the city separately. But the most important update is coming from the northern Slaviansk direction. Pro-Russian sources published this video. Here we can see how Russians were moving through the settlement of Svetogorsk. Here we can see Russian troops that were moving freely under the protection of Russia's FPV drones. These episodes took place somewhere in this area. One of them was geolocated right exactly at this point. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that Russians managed to break through Ukrainian defense, answer the settlement of Svetogorsk, and to cut the logistic of Yarova completely. Now we understand that the settlement of Yarova was caught by Russians in pincers without any chances to supply and support or to restore the communication with this area. We believe that in coming days the Russians will intensify their offensive operation with the purpose to establish complete control over the territory, and then the most important part begins: what the Russians are going to do next. Because from these positions Russians may try to cross the river of Seversky Donets and with the purpose to establish complete control over the forest which is located to the north of the city of Slaviansk, or the Russians can continue offensive operation further in the western direction with the purpose to attack the settlement of Izum. As for the Kupiansk direction, during the previous 24 hours, several sources, pro-Russian sources and a neutral mapper, reported that Russians improved their position significantly in the area of the settlement of Tishinkovka. This settlement was captured, and we are waiting for the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation confirmation or report. As for the northern directions, during the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded in the Sumy direction. These are the changes on the ground between the dates between the 8th, 7th, 8th, and 9th of January 2026. The Russians managed to shorten the distance to the settlement of Mala Karchakovka, and currently the distance to the village is already less than 1 kilometer. We believe that in coming days, Russians will answer this defense layer of the siege of Sumy, and the clashes will begin for the most important defense layer. If Russians are able to establish complete control over this territory, then I'm not even sure what exactly the Ukrainians are going to do with the purpose to save control over the siege of Sumy itself. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.